Please be seated. As I was preparing for today, it just kind of reminded me, you know how you watch series and all on television, and they've always got to go back last week on, or whatever, however they say it, and they give you that little bit and piece. Well, by the time you get to the 4th chapter of Ruth, there seems to be a lot of time needed to bring everybody up, because we have people who are not here every week. We have people who live in other places and have places down here, and so they haven't had the opportunity to be a part of the first 3 chapters of the book of Ruth. What a great book, and I love the way it concludes, because it concludes at the place that we would all want it to conclude. But I did not start at the ending, but I need to remind us that in chapter 1, you remember Naomi and her husband Elimelech had gone to Moab because of the drought in their land, and we're going to stay a little while, maybe a year or 2 at the most, and come on back, and 2 turned into 10, and the next thing you know, Elimelech dies and the 2 sons die, and so here she is. Their wives continue, the son's wives, so she has these 2 daughter-in-laws, and she has this, it has herself, and she heads back. She decides that she'll head back to her home, and she is very bitter about things. Remember, she says that the Lord, she blames God, and that's not uncommon. You let a disaster happen in your life, and you're a faithful person. It is very easy to drag God into the midst of your pain and suffering. I'm not saying you shouldn't do it. I'm not saying you should do it, but it's very common for people to say to me over my 43 years, I can't believe God let this happen to me. It happens. And there's a lot of pain in that voice, and often tears and sadness. Well, she is pretty PO'd with God, however you want it to be, and she's very bitter about her life circumstance. Well, they go back. She decides, and she tells her 2 daughter-in-laws, y'all just stay here. You're from Moab. This is a pagan land, I know, but all your family's here and so forth. And I'll just go back on my own. And if you remember, after a second plea, Ruth decides to stay with her, and the other daughter-in-law stays behind. And so they go, and they get there at gathering time. Are y'all still gathering, Wade, or are you through gathering everything? You still gathering? It's all done. All right, y'all are at the threshing floor. So Wade is kind of like Boaz in this thing, you know, because he owns the place. You know, somebody got to do the work. And there's all these people out there threshing this barley and doing all this work. The rest of them, the landowners, the ones who have this, have the workers doing the work, and it says that they're having a big party. And so they celebrate. But before we get to that celebration, when they get there, this would be Naomi and Ruth, when they get there, and during this season of the year, Ruth looks at her mother-in-law. She says, Naomi, I'll just go out to the field. Remember that we have people who can go behind the combines and so forth and get what little bit is left. We still do that in the cotton fields in Laurinburg, and I have gleaned sweet potatoes, and I know I've mentioned some of this in this series, but at any rate, they move forward as they're doing what they're doing. Well, as things would have it, now I like to think this is a lovely woman. She's a young woman, and compared to a lot of them. But as she's out there gathering so they'll have something to eat, Boaz happens to take note of her. It's not necessarily because she's so lovely, it's because she's so new. And he owns that field, and he owns that crop and all that goes with it. And he sees this strange person. And so he finds out that it is Ruth, the daughter-in-law of Naomi. And so when he finds that out, he tells his foremen and so forth, y'all be nice to them. Be nice to her. And whenever it comes time to eat, let her eat with you. She needs water, let her have water. And at the end of the day, he even goes to him and says, kind of knock a little bit out of the sacks and make sure she has, she gets a whole week's worth at the end of that first day, so she did pretty well. It was quite a thing. Well then, as life is changing for Naomi and changing for Ruth, there are ways of doing things. Remember, I was going to get down on my knee. I didn't completely do it last week and ask Diane to marry me. We have different ways of doing this. I think I just handed you the diamond. I didn't do that good, did I? For our final hymn this morning, so I go. And I one day will get it right. And so they began to think about their future and what they might need. And so Naomi gives Ruth instruction on how they do it in Bethlehem, in that Canaan land, in that promised land, not in that pagan land of Moab. She said, here's what you need to do. While all this is going on and the crops coming in, they're going to be eating and drinking wine and whatever and having a good time. And they're going to go in there and they're going to go to sleep. And whenever they do, you go and you pull the cover back, you kind of get his feet. Like I told you, this doesn't get seedy because I'm sure there's a whole lot of people on the floor of the threshing area. And so he's there. He's there simply to guard his crop. The people still sleep in the back of warehouses, you reckon, Wade, to make sure nobody steals their tobacco. You don't do tobacco. They used to. I can understand so somebody doesn't sleepwalk, wind up with some of your tobacco. And so they had their way of doing this, and that's what they were doing. And so as things moved on, she tells her how to do the do. Well, Boaz isn't foolish, and he knows how all of this works. And so she is going to him in this newfound land, and Ruth is, and she does what her mother-in-law tells her to do. Well, Naomi comes up with this, but Boaz is a little smitten, I think, with Ruth anyway, and she knows where he's going to be. So thus enters into what we're going to get to for chapter 4, and I'll be reading it along so I don't read it collectively. Today is, I think, a very, very spiritual and thrilling almost conclusion to this story as it comes to an end. What we wonder is if Boaz, what they refer to as the kinsman redeemer, remember? And what's a kinsman redeemer anyway? But he's like what I never had but always wanted. That was a rich uncle. Well, I don't know how well you knew him, but I was reading the will, and he sure does think a lot of you. Your uncle from, has just left you, boom, boom, boom. Oh, I loved him. He was wonderful, I never had a kinsman redeemer like that. Maybe you did, and more power to you. But at any rate, he was like that rich uncle that came along in the life of the story. Okay? After Boaz told Ruth he would take care of the matter of all this, he's got to decide on this kinsman redeemer situation. There's one in front of him. There's one in front of Boaz. And so how do you do it? How well he planned this and whether or not he was trying to manipulate things is for the interpreter. All right? But he goes and he gets 10 elders from the community. He goes and he gets those 10 elders and he brings them on together. He goes up to town and he has them and they're sitting at the gate. What's he doing? He's waiting for the first in line kinsman redeemer to show up. And it says in verse 2, when the kinsman redeemer he had mentioned came along, Boaz said, "Come over here, my friend, and sit down." So he went over and he sat down, and Boaz took those 10 elders of the town, and they all sat down. In verse 3 says, then he said to the kinsman redeemer, Naomi, okay, he knows who she is, who has come back from Moab, verse 3, and she is selling a piece of the land that belongs to our brother. That brother could be an actual kinsperson, which it probably was, but at least he was well connected. Elimelech was that brother. And so this first in line person, kinsman redeemer, knows who he is. All right, verse 4, he says, I thought I should bring the matter to your attention and suggest that you buy this land in the presence of these here and in the presence of the elders of my people. If you will redeem it, then do so. But if you will not, tell me, so I will know what your intent is. For no one has the right to do it except you. You're number one, you're first in line. And it's simple for him. He says, I'll do it. I'll redeem it. And so Boaz, he's got all these witnesses there, y'all. He says Boaz knew exactly what he was doing, I think. He discusses now this redemption with all those guys present from the town. So they'll hear everything. And he wants this guy to make a quick decision, I think. Decide right now, what you going to do? What you going to do? Sounds just like what you were taught whenever you were trading the stock market and advising people, because when I took classes, that guy said from 9:30 to 4 o'clock, Monday through Friday, if you own a stock, if you own an option, all day long that you're being confronted. Now what you going to do? Are you going to sell? Are you going to buy? What you going to do? And that stock market is in your face from 9:30 to 4 o'clock. And I can remember that so well. Well, that's what that's what Boaz is kind of wanting to do to this first one in line. At first, Boaz made it seem like a simple transaction. Buy some land, help a family member out. And the guy says, sure, I'll do it. I'll be more than glad to do it. Then Boaz lets the man know what he's getting into. In verse 5, he says to him, on the day you buy the land from Naomi and from Ruth the Moabitess, you acquire the dead man's widow in order to maintain the name of the dead with his property. Now, he's changing the game now, because it's like I've told Diane, and she don't like to hear it. I said, Diane, if you die and I look at another woman, I'm going to look who's behind her. And if she looks like me, I'm going home, because I'll be looking at her. Oh, you're so sweet and pretty. You're such a fine person. Who is that? Oh, that's my son and daughter. Well, who's that behind it? Oh, that's their 4 children and 2 children. And I see, and all I can see is baseball games, dance recitals, money, whatever. I'm like, I'll call you, that's what is going on. That guy's he's going from this first in line from, I get me some property at a good price. And it's going from that to, all this entourage is involved in the situation too. Okay, I think Boaz knows what he's doing. I think the man's pretty slick, to be honest with you. It changed everything, all right? Taking the responsibility of a new family, he's saying. Verse 6, he says, at this the kinsman redeemer said, then I can't redeem, because it might endanger me and my wife and children. Whenever you get involved and you bring another woman or another man, another family into your household, honey, it's going to affect your household. I don't care what age we're in. I don't care what you can call history and tradition and all the things that are in the ancient Near East. We're 3,000 years back, y'all. Maybe a little more than that. It doesn't matter. Life is life, all right? And he says to him, I can't do it. You redeemer yourself. I can't do it, he says. Now in verse 7 through 10, it reads like this. Now in the earlier times in Israel, for the redemption and transfer of property to become final, one party took off their sandal. Took off a sandal and handed it to the other one. Is that a whole lot different than a handshake? Let's do it. Boom, we're going to do it. all right? I just gave you John's truck. Don't worry about a thing, all right? Sell it. Take the sandal off and give it to them. You make the deal. That's what they did. So the kinsman redeemer said, I'm not going to do it in verse 8. Buy it yourself. And he gets his sandal back, I reckon. It says he removed his sandal. Then Boaz announced to the elders sitting there, listening to the interaction and the conversation, today y'all are witnesses that I have bought from Naomi, I'm second in line, all the property of Elimelech, her dead husband, and Kilian and Mahlon. That's the two sons who left her two daughter-in-laws. In verse 10, I have also acquired Ruth, the Moabitess, Mahlon's widow, as my wife, in order to maintain the name of the dead with his property, so that his name will not disappear from among his family and from the town records. Today you are a witness. Today the idea seems strange, buying property, getting a wife. A lot of us don't like that kind of thing. I'm not for sale, you 21st, 22nd, whatever century people might be, but you're reading it wrong. You're reading it wrong, and I'm going to give you a little bit of my story. I've been so blessed to have a good life and have certainly a fabulous wife, and we have two wonderful children, 6 wonderful grandchildren. I text 2 of them this morning. Actually heard back from one. It'll be up not now, but maybe by 1. And so I can remember that I got a job with Brown & Williamson Tobacco Company selling Cool, Viceroy, Raleigh, and Bel Airs, Tubro Snuff, Raleigh Smoking Tobacco. I had Guilford County, Greensboro, and High Point. You went to college back in 1970 and got a degree hoping to get this job. I was so fortunate. I had flunked out of college, but I still got the job through a connection. And I worked that job a couple of years, and then I went back home to work with my father. I got back there, and I'm out on the wash rack, days like some of these mornings breaking ice off the wash bucket to get to the rag because Mr. Wilson called. He wants to drive that LeSabre Buick sitting out there, and Daddy wants me to rinse the dust off. Honey, that means get a rag, wash the car is what it means. And so I did that, and it didn't take me long before I realized, what in the world were you thinking about? That you might quit a job wearing a white shirt and tie, coat and tie, depending on the season, driving a company car, having all these benefits, Monday through Friday, 8 hours a day, off the weekend. You quit that to work 5.5 days a week, Monday through Saturday lunch, 10 hours a day, buffing and waxing and cleaning cars, occasionally selling one or going to pick one up. I quit that good job to take that bad job. And I thought about many times, what in the world were you thinking about to have done such as this? Stay with me, y'all, okay? And so, but that's what I did. And then one day, remember, y'all came along. And y'all came to my home church, and you began to get up and testify that weekend and tell what God had done in your life. And I gave my heart to God that weekend. And I changed my life and lifestyle in so many ways. And gradually, over time, God called me into the ministry, and we have had a fabulous 43 years, especially right here in this small church. What you might think is bad may be a road that you need to be on to get you where God can put you in a wonderful, better place. Never forget that. That came to me. I know you know my story, but it came to me and I thought, wow, you know, how bad off Naomi was. I'm mad with God. I'm mad with the world. Don't talk to me. Call me Myra. I'm bitter. Don't call me Naomi, she says. Yeah. And now things are beginning to turn. Then the elders and all those at the gate bear witness to it. And Boaz takes Ruth, and she becomes his wife. And then he went to her, and you know what that means. And the Lord enabled her to conceive, and she gave birth to a son. It's a beautiful thing. It's a wonderful thing. All right. After Ruth had her son, the women came together and they said to Naomi in verse 14, "Praise be to the Lord who this day has not left you without a kinsman redeemer." That's Boaz. "May he become famous throughout Israel. He will renew your life and sustain you in your old age." Well, that describes some of us. They're referring on the one hand to Boaz, whose generosity has saved his people, and he has kept alive the family name. But what about the little boy? Ruth has this little boy with Boaz. And they're really, in their own way, maybe calling him a kinsman redeemer on this occasion, because the little boy represents the completion of God's interaction, God's redemption, God's place in Naomi's life. And so I celebrate that. What do you think is going to happen? Well, in verse 15 it says, "For your daughter-in-law who loves you and who is better to you than 7 sons has given him birth." Okay, now let's leave the men a minute and let's see how important the women are. Because it's saying right there in that verse that these 7 men are not nearly as significant as this one woman. That one woman is going to become a part and parcel to history and to life in ways that 7 sons could never do. And I like that. At first, Naomi saw her daughter-in-law as a burden. She could only think of that financial obligation and all that goes with it. But in this greater picture, let's think about what happens. And so you stay with me on this. I want to make sure that I get to the right moment. Okay, so Ruth has the son. His name is Obed. Okay, and Obed, how you pronounce it? I call it Obed, O-B-E-D, all right? And so she gives birth to that child. Naomi, mad, comes back home. Ruth comes with her. They hook up with a kinsman redeemer and Boaz, and they're moving forward. And Ruth has this little boy, Obed. And this little boy, who is he? Well, let's track him in just a minute. And this is the essence of the story for me, because it always comes back to where I want it to be. Obed, he has a father whose name is what? Jesse. And Jesse has a son whose name is what? David. Remember the guy on the side of the road? And Jesus is coming by, and he hollers out what to him? Jesus, son of David. Well, David ain't his daddy. Joseph's his daddy. Of course, we believe in the divine conception, you know. But David had lived hundreds of years prior. But David he's the one that was the shepherd boy. He's the one that was a little bit frail when he saw the pretty girl taking the bath, I know. But he also killed Goliath, didn't he? Didn't he write for you and me? The Lord is my shepherd. He wrote for us some of the greatest things that we have, and how wonderful he is. And so, David, Obed, Jesse, David. And where do we go? But David is in that line and lineage of the Lord Jesus. Now remember, I'm out there washing cars, and I'm either kind of raw in the summer, and that's as good as I can say it. You got to figure it out. Or my fingers are split, especially my thumbs, from getting in that cold bucket and getting into the cold air. I remember those days. And look at me today. It may be cold outside, but look what I have on. God brought me here. And God brought you here. And God took Naomi over to stay a little while in Moab, and He brings her back, and then they hook up, and then they have family, and they get renewed, and they get strengthened. And so now we have the line and the lineage of David down to our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. Look what God can do in the midst of a stinking mess. I don't know if you're a stinking mess or not. Now, I'm not going to call any of y'all that. Well, except for maybe gay. But other than that, other than her, I don't know where you are. I don't. I don't know where all you've been, though I do know some of your stories. But I know that God can take your story, wherever you are and wherever you've been, and God can make a victory in Jesus in your life. That's enough. Did we run over today? Daggone, I didn't even get paid extra. Come on, let's stand. Let's stand and sing together. Be not dismayed, whatever betide,
God will take care of you. Mean as the wind from abide, God will take care of you. God will take care of you through every day or all the way. He will take care of you. God will take care of you. Through days of toil and heart doth fail, God will take care of you. When danger seems surpass the sail, God will take care of you. God will take care of you through every day or all the way. He will take care of you. God will take care of you. All that you need He will provide. God will take care of you. Nothing you ask will be denied. God will take care of you. God will take care of you through every day or all the way. He will take care of you. God will take care of you. God will take care of you. Lean, weary one upon His breast. God will take care of you. God will take care of you through every day or all the way. He will take care of you. God will take care of you.
Run a couple of things to remind you. Of course, we will have Sunday school, and thank you for your leadership, Wally. We look forward to being with you. In this room, the missions committee, okay? Kathy has food, and anybody can, we're talking about small boxes. We're not talking about heavy stuff. Anybody can pick these up, probably several at the time. Some of you follow her, and at 2 o'clock, trustees come, wear your long johns. We're going to be outside a while, and go in peace. And just know that this is a story of redemption. It's not a story of anything less. That God gets in the middle of life's circumstance, regardless of how bad they might be. And when God gets in the middle of it, then Jesus often emerges. Go in peace. Amen.
Chuck, is your water? Chuck. That's yours.